Hello. Welcome to the Poetry Foundation's virtual reading for young people with Young People's Poet Laureate Naomi Shihab Nye. My name is Alex, and I am the events coordinator at the Poetry Foundation. We recognize that the Poetry Foundation building is situated on the occupied original homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. Indigenous people continue to live here today, and Chicago is home to one of the largest urban Indigenous communities in the United States. This is a relaxed virtual space. Feel free to do whatever you need for your body and mind to be more comfortable. Take a second now to make yourself 10% more comfortable. Thank you, and enjoy the reading.
And now let's welcome today's poet. Naomi Shihab Nye is a Palestinian-American writer who lives in San Antonio. Nye is acclaimed as a children's writer for her sensitivity and cultural awareness. She is the recipient of numerous awards for her work, which moves seamlessly between ages in a way that is accessible, warm, and sophisticated. A self-described wandering poet, she inspires curiosity and wonder as a writer and teacher. She has 2 new books out this year: Everything Comes Next, collected in new poems, and Castaway, Poems for Our Time. For more than 40 years, Nye has conducted workshops with students all over the world, including China, Japan, Oman, Jordan, the UAE, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and France. After editing 9 poetry anthologies, she has recently been poetry editor for the New York Times Magazine and has edited poems for the Texas Observer for more than 20 years. In 2019, she received the Ivan Sandroff Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Book Critics Circle. Yet she has never really thought in terms of achievements, more about the joy and expansion poetry brings to any life. Please welcome Naomi Shihab Nye.
Hello, friends of poetry. Thanks to the Poetry Foundation for getting us together today. I'm so happy to be with you. My name is Naomi Shihab Nye, and I am sitting in my little studio in my old house in the heart of downtown San Antonio, Texas. And I am wearing a polka dotted shirt, which I have heard is a bad thing to do if you're making a video. But I just got tired of wearing black shirts all the time on video, so I'm wearing a shirt that has personal meaning to me today. And I feel very grateful that we have technology that can bring us together. My studio looks very messy, if you can see it. It's got a lot of books in it, a lot of little pieces of art, but I love it very much. It's like my personal little changing gallery. And I do feel like I know where most things are in here. It's a lovely place to work. It's full of different colors and light coming in through skylights. And I like to write poems in here, but really I like to write poems anywhere. So thank you for being here today. And I'm going to make a few suggestions after I read each poem, just for your own possible writing. I'm always interested in the positive contagion of a poem. You hear somebody else's poem and it makes you think of one you could write that is in some way parallel or related. So we're living in a world of mysteries these days. A lot of mysterious things keep going on. We don't know how they'll be solved. And in fact, I'm reading all from a brand new book of mine called Everything Comes Next, new collected and new poems. And the cover and the interior artwork is by Rafael Lopez. And I like the title, Everything Comes Next, even more than I did when I chose it, which was sometime last autumn before the pandemic, because we really want some good things to come next, right? So I'm reading this little poem called Mysterious World. My grandparents sold their old gray house in Illinois with everything in it: sewing machines, piano, rocking chair. Till now, the attic packed with their receipts. My father died with his head full of stories, hopes, a perfect command of 2 languages. I'm standing by a creek that sends everything it knows downstream. So think of some things in your own life that feel mysterious right now. You're not sure where you're going. Maybe some of them you'd like to throw into the creek and send them downstream. Certainly we all feel that way about COVID. Beat it, disappear please. So just make a little list on your paper maybe of mysteries that haunt you right now. Things you don't quite know how to answer. I think that's a place many poems begin. And then, because we've had a lot of time at home, in quarantine, isolated, without our friends, without strangers, over the past many months, I'm reading a poem called Messages from Everywhere. Light up our backyard. A bird that flew 5,000 miles is trilling 6 bright notes. This bird flew over mountains and valleys and tiny dolls and pencils of children I will never see. Because this bird is singing to me, I belong to the wide wind, the people far away who share the air and the clouds. Together we are looking up into all we do not own, and we are listening. Is there anything you feel has tried to give you a message over the past few months? It could be that tree outside your window. It could be a street light that you look at in a different way. It could be the creak in your front door. Message from something that we often don't think of as speaking. I actually think a lot of poems in the world begin with this kind of mysterious detection of a message, like, oh, that thing is speaking to me. That glass of water sitting on the table is shining a certain way, and that reminds me of. So something you feel has given you a message from your very close environment. In this poem is a phrase, all we do not own. And I realize that exact phrase has shown up in at least 2 or 3 of my poems in recent years. And I'm really fascinated by that phrase. I guess because we live in a very consumer-based society and there's a lot of stuff, a lot of purchase, and I'm intrigued by how rich we become because of all we do not own at the same time. So think about something that's given you messages. Now, when I was a kid, I lived for the first years of my life in Ferguson, Missouri, a place you may have heard of. And I was very attached to the library in our borough of St. Louis. And I went there every Saturday afternoon, checked out as many books as they would let me take. And I felt that the library made me rich, speaking of all we do not own. And so this poem has a very simple concept in it, but I think the title can be used as maybe something, a prompt in a minute. I'll suggest that. Because of libraries, we can say these things. She is holding the book close to her body, carrying it home on the cracked sidewalk, down the tangled hill. If a dog runs at her again, she will use the book as a shield. She looked hard among long lines of books to find this one. When they start talking about money, when the day contains such long and hot places, she will go inside. An orange bed is waiting, story without corners. She will have 2 families. They will eat at different hours. She is carrying a book past the fire station and the 5 and dime. What this town has not given her, the book will provide. A sheep, a wilderness, of new solutions. The book has already lived through its troubles. The book has a calm cover, a straight spine. When the step returns to itself as the best place for sitting, and the old men up and down the street are latching their clippers, she will not be alone. She will have a book to open and open and open. Her life starts here. So the title of this poem, the way it's constructed, now maybe you could do one with something else entirely, being given credit for who you are becoming. My title is Because of Libraries, We Can Say These Things. Yours might be Because of Running, We Can Something. Because of sleeping late, we can something. Because of films, we can something. Kind of cause and effect in a poem, very simple. And of course I do that little tricky poetry device that some people do sometimes, talking about myself as a third person. She's doing this. Really, it was me. The part about the dog running at me was true. I was attacked by a dog. It bit me right across my cheek the first time I ever had stitches. And I wasn't able to fight it off because I was carrying so many books home from the library, trying to protect them. And this dog jumped and bit me on the cheek. It was very weird. So for a while after that, I only would check out one extremely large book to use as a shield when I was walking home. Play around with it. See what comes up. See if you figure out even why you like something so much. Looking back on the importance of libraries in my childhood, I felt very, very lucky that we have so many of them in the world. We should never take them for granted. Libraries in our schools, even though we have Google now and internet and computers everywhere, don't ever forget about those books that are patiently waiting for you on the shelves in a library. And then here's another suggestion. I don't know if anyone asks you questions that annoy you or make you irritated or you really don't want to answer. But for years when I was really young and I was working in schools already with kids and poetry, a lot of kids would look at me and say, "Are you famous?" And I found that really a weird question. I would say, "Well, everybody's famous. You're famous to the guy sitting next to you, right? What does famous mean anyway?" And they would say, "Well, you don't look famous," or like, "Where do you live?" or "How did you come in our library? Why are you here?" So finally, I just kept thinking about that word. It was never one of my favorite words, famous. And so I wrote a poem that anytime anyone asked me that question, I could just read this poem to them. And recently, another example of that kind of question is I hear a lot of people ask my 4-year-old grandson, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I think that's not a good question. How should he know? He's 4 years old. He's just like discovering the world. There's so much out there. Why does he have to think about a job right now? I think it would be much more interesting just to ask him, "What's your favorite book? What do you like to do?" Not "What do you want to be someday?" which is very abstract and in some ways, I think, a little insulting. I didn't even want people to ask me that question when I was in high school. So here's the famous poem I wrote in response, and I read it for years to kids. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous, briefly, to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. So 2 possibilities for prompt from this poem would be things in your life that are famous to other things, or people who are famous to what in your own life, or a question that annoys you. Answer it in a quirky way, an original way, and see how that goes. So I think I have time for maybe one more poem. Is that okay? I am very disturbed, as many of you are, probably also, by gun violence. I'm very disturbed by the proximity of so many weapons to children. And I wrote a poem for a boy I heard about. It's his real name in the poem. He lived in Gaza. My father was Palestinian. My father never lived in Gaza, but lived in Palestine, which is part of, they're all connected. So I heard about this boy, and I'll close with this poem. And I wish you all a safe world, but think of something you read about in the news that is very disturbing to you and speak to it. Like, don't just speak about it, but speak to it. So in this poem, I'm objecting to the language that's used to describe the bullet. For Mohammed Zaid of Gaza, age 15, there is no stray bullet, sirs. No bullet like a worried cat crouching under a bush. No half-hairless puppy bullet dodging midnight streets. The bullet could not be a pecan plunking tin roof, not hardly, no fluff of pollen on October's breath, no humble pebble at our feet. So don't gentle it, please. We live among stray thoughts, tasks abandoned midstream. Our fickle hearts are fat with stray devotions. We feel at home among bits and pieces, all the wandering ways of words. But this bullet had no innocence, did not wish anyone well. You can't tell us otherwise by naming it mildly. This bullet was never the friend of life, should not be granted immunity by soft saying, friendly fire, straying death eye. Why have we given the wrong weight to what we do? Mohammed deserves the truth. This bullet had no secret happy hopes. It was not singing to itself with eyes closed under the bridge. I thank you for listening to me, and I wish you a lot of power in your own pages and your own poems. And feeling comfortable with your own pages is one of the gifts poetry gives us. Remember, you can scribble things down and change them later and add other things. A lot of joy to be had in staring at words and phrases and lines and letting yourself ask the questions you need to ask. Thanks a lot. I look forward to your questions if you have any. just encourage that sturdiness in yourself and in your friends, that sharing your work could make good things happen. You just don't know what'll happen next. Every single publishing adventure in my life, like book-wise, came about because an editor or publisher had read something of mine somewhere else. And another question, what are little ways to train our attention towards what is delightful or what speaks to us? Take notes. Just get in the habit of taking notes every morning or every afternoon or before you go to sleep. They don't have to be 10 pages of notes. They could be 3 lines, but the regularity will help you notice more. And when you're in a time of sadness, it can be very helpful to take notes because you often are restored to things that help you feel better. You develop that sort of gratitude journal habit mysteriously. It starts happening for you more easily. Please don't wait for big things to happen to write them down. As you probably heard, most of my poems start with very little things, except maybe the boy's death, which was, of course, a huge thing for everyone in his world. How did I start writing? I was lucky enough to listen to poems before I could read. My mom read me poems, and then I felt the space around poetry being a better kind of space than the space around human conversation. So I thought, when I learn how to write, I want to write some things like that. My first poem was called Chicago. In my mind, it will forever be dedicated to the Poetry Foundation now. It was like a full circle to get to be connected to you all there. And when did you think you were ready to start your poem adventure? The minute I learned how to write. I have my first 6-year-old poems, some copies of them, and on that, first grade paper, written in pencil. And I just got into the habit of writing little things down all the time. Question, what book of poetry was I reading from today? It's from the brand new book called Everything Comes Next from Green Willow. And it just came out within the last month. It's collected and new poems. So if you've read any others of my books, you might find some poems you already knew in there. I felt a little shy about doing that. I don't want anyone to think I'm buying a new book and then think, oh, I read this poem before. I hope you don't mind if you see some poems again that you saw before. What's a poem you often find yourself going back to? I always go back to poems by William Stafford, W.S. Merwin, Lucille Clifton, Toy Derricott. These are just some of my many, many favorites. Poems I loved as a child, I go back to them. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Robert Louis Stevenson. I have hundreds of favorite poets, and I like to go back to all of them. But right now, if I were naming one, I would say, look at W.S. Merwin's poem called Thanks. He wrote many poems about thanks, and they're list poems, categories of, or different things put into kind of a catalog, of things he wanted to express gratitude for. And where do I find my greatest inspiration? I guess that's the last question I have a chance to answer, but thank you all so much for being here and for asking me questions. My greatest inspiration is in the lives we are living, the days we are given. The fact that we have breath and are on the earth is enough miracle to think about forever. Paying attention, observing what's happening around us, that's where inspiration comes from. Thank you so much.